Dando seguimento aos eventos do IANSP, aprimorando a cultura do tratamento, do desenvolvimento com a saúde do idoso, nós vamos hoje promover o seminário que se chama Desenvolvendo uma Cultura do Cuidado, como o Canadá cuida da sua população idosa. Com base na experiência do Canadá, que é um país com processo de envelhecimento mais antigo do que o do Brasil, nós vamos explorar algumas diretrizes para a organização do cuidado e discutir as abordagens para melhorar as práticas dos cuidados sociais e de saúde, baseadas no modelo desenvolvidas no Canadá pela NICE. O que é a NICE? A Iniciativa Nacional para os Cuidados da Pessoa Idosa. Antes de chamar as autoridades ao palco, eu queria rapidamente fazer alguns agradecimentos. Agradecer à Universidade de São Paulo pela ajuda na realização desse evento, a figura do professor Luiz Henrique Amaral, que não pôde estar presente, representado pela professora Denise. Muito obrigado. Agradecer ao ILC, que é o Centro Internacional de Longevidade, na figura da senhora Ina, que também aqui está presente, que esteve conosco todo o tempo, aprimorando o nosso evento. Agradecer a todos os colaboradores do IANSP, todos, apenas citando rapidamente a Tatiana da Comunicação, o Maurício Wagner dos Eventos, o engenheiro Walter, representa todos os outros que nos ajudam cotidianamente. Agradecer, por último, o nosso superintendente, que tem dedicado um apoio total ao ensino, à pesquisa e também à assistência. Vamos fazer então a composição do nosso palco. Eu chamo inicialmente o Dr. Latif Abrão Júnior, superintendente do IANSP. Por favor, Dr. Latif. Dr. Roberto Dantas Queiroz, diretor do Hospital do Servidor Público Estadual. Convido também Dr. Braulio Luna Filho, presidente do Conselho Regional de Medicina do Estado de São Paulo. Por favor, suba ao palco também Dr. Henrique Rubens Jerozolimski, presidente do Conselho Estadual do Idoso. Doutora Cláudia Fló, coordenadora da área técnica do idoso da Secretaria Estadual de Saúde. Doutor Alexandre Kalashi, médico, gerontólogo e parceiro do IANSP na busca do selo do Hospital Amigo do Idoso. A nossa palestrante, Lynn MacDonald, professora da Faculdade de Serviço Social da Universidade de Toronto. A doutora Luíse, nossa convidada também, deve estar chegando. Assim que ela chegar, já assume seu posto. Vou passar a palavra inicialmente para o doutor Latif, superintendente do IANSP, para que profira as palavras iniciais. Por favor, doutor Latif.
Bom dia a todos que nos honram hoje com a presença nessa jornada de trabalho Cito nominalmente o Dr. Braulio, presidente do Conselho Regional de Medicina, o Henrique Rubens, presidente do Conselho do Programa São Paulo, amigo do idoso, professora Lynn McDonald, professora canadense, professora Luíse, que está chegando, e também a assessora do Dr. Kalash, além dele próprio, a Ina Volker, que também faz parte da equipe que está aqui hoje. Bom dia a todos, e eu espero que vocês, principalmente este corpo de profissionais da nossa instituição, possam aproveitar adequadamente esse dia, discutindo um assunto que será pauta nos próximos anos, sem dúvida. Em 2020, 1 em cada 6 americanos terá mais de 65 anos de idade. É uma realidade presente lá, na Europa, no mundo e aqui no Brasil. A nossa população requer profissionais preparados para atender essa realidade. E isso inclui todo tipo de atividade que nós estamos desenvolvendo, como o programa de sensibilização, que foi montado aqui e já passaram mais de 4.000 pessoas, como o prédio Amigo do Idoso, que nós vamos caracterizar como adequado para o atendimento da pessoa da melhor idade, vamos dizer assim. Eu não gosto dessa expressão também, aprendi com o Dr. Kalash, mas a gente de vez em quando usa. Muito bem. Dear Dr. Lynn McDonald, dear my friend Dr. Alexandre Kalash, I greatly appreciate you being with us in this work on the importance of developing a culture of care. The IANSP is the health system on the servants of the state of São Paulo. This is therefore a benefit to the service, linked to the Secretary of the State for Planning and Management. Assisted by IANSP population through its own and accredited network is 1,300,000, 35% of them over 60 years, represents 10% of the population over 60 of the entire state. We seek to differentiate ourselves in the care of this specific population through programs such as making the hospital a hospital friend of the older person. This initiative in the clinical staff and the health professional of this institution, but the beginning and the guidelines should especially Dr. Kalash. Today, it stands their acknowledgement to the development of public policy in the state of São Paulo related care in the broadest sense of the term, with the elderly. We want to learn, as Canada takes care of its elderly population, and forward a little within the time constraints of a journey of one day off our initiatives and charities. The hospital civil servants is one of the oldest and most important hospital organizations of Latin America. Our job is to place in a prominent position we held for decades. We work abroad a modernization program, including structural reform, still long overdue and now essential. Welcome to IANSP. I bring you an efficient hub, Governor Geraldo Alckmin and Secretary Marcos Monteiro. Thank you. Vamos dar início então à nossa programação e eu espero que todos tenham e façam um bom proveito. Muito obrigado a todos. Vamos ao trabalho.
Obrigado, doutor Latif. Quero agradecer a presença da doutora Louise Flouve, que já está conosco. Ela é uma pesquisadora canadense, doutora em psicologia, ex-coordenadora de pesquisa do ILC do Brasil e integrante do ILC do Canadá. A Louise contribuiu durante 25 anos para o desenvolvimento de políticas e práticas sobre o envelhecimento, tanto no Canadá como internacionalmente. Como executiva sênior da Organização Mundial de Saúde, a doutora Flouve foi responsável, juntamente com o Dr. Alexandre Kalash, pelo desenvolvimento do guia da Organização Mundial de Saúde, Cidades Amigas do Idoso, e da publicação Pessoas Idosas nas Emergências. Dando seguimento, gostaria de passar a palavra rapidamente ao Dr. Roberto Queiroz, diretor do hospital, para que fizesse uma breve saudação.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigado, Abrão. Com felicidade que eu vejo que realmente a gente consegue, mais uma vez, consolidar essa política de atenção ao idoso aqui no Hospital do Servidor do Estado. Demonstração é essa que está cheio, mais uma vez, o evento que está sendo organizado em conjunto com a Superintendência e com o CEDEP. Gostaria de agradecer a presença dos professores estrangeiros, dona Lynn MacDonald e a doutora Louise Flouve, o presidente do CRM Braulio, o doutor Henrique e a doutora Cláudia Fló. Como representante de todo o corpo dos funcionários aqui do Hospital do Servidor, gostaria de lembrar que o doutor Abrão no começo falou que o Canadá já é um país que já vive uma idade mais avançada. O servidor do Estado, o IANSP, já vive essa realidade. Todos nós aqui sabemos que convivemos com a grande maioria dos nossos pacientes acima de 65 anos de idade. E uma demonstração nítida, a gente vê agora que todos estão realmente imbuídos e preocupados em melhorar cada vez mais o atendimento desse tipo de população. Eu agradeço a presença de todos e espero que todos aproveitem muito esse evento. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, doutor Queiroz. Antes de passar a palavra para o doutor Alexandre Kalash, que é um amigo da casa, vem nos ajudando a desenvolver os projetos sobre os idosos, creio que a maioria dos senhores já o conhece, mas para quem não conhece, é minha obrigação citar que o doutor Alexandre Kalash, ele é médico e gerontólogo, além de ser o presidente do Centro Internacional de Longevidade Brasil, ele é PhD em epidemiologia pela Universidade de Oxford, fundador da Unidade de Epidemiologia do Envelhecimento da Universidade de Londres, criador do primeiro mestrado em promoção da saúde da Europa. Kalash dirigiu o Departamento de Envelhecimento e Curso de Vida da Organização Mundial da Saúde, onde concebeu e publicou em 2002 o Marco Político do Envelhecimento Ativo, e em 2005 a iniciativa Cidades Amigas do Idoso. Alexandre Kalash integra conselhos em diversas partes do mundo, atua como consultor em diferentes países e é professor em 5 universidades no exterior. É uma honra, portanto, para nós tê-lo aqui na casa mais uma vez, e eu passo a palavra ao Dr. Alexandre Kalash.
Muito obrigado, Abrão. Obrigado também pela gentil acolhida do meu amigo Abrão Latif e a todos que integram a mesa. Eu realmente me sinto em casa. Já há alguns anos eu tenho vindo aqui ao IANSP em diferentes oportunidades, ora como consultor, ora apenas como visita, ora para a gente poder conversar, inclusive com a administração. O Baviera está aqui sentado na primeira fila. E é exatamente com esse intuito que a gente começou a pensar o que poderia fazer do IANSP uma referência nacional e internacional no que toca a cuidados da pessoa idosa. E o porquê disso? O IANSP é o Brasil de amanhã. Vocês já estão lidando com uma grande maioria, como o Abrão acabou de falar, dos pacientes acima de 60 anos. E essa vai ser a realidade do Brasil como um todo, dentro de muito pouco tempo. Vocês que sejam profissionais com 25, 30 anos, e que vão ter um tempo de atividade profissional até, digamos, os 70 anos, vocês vão exercer medicina, enfermagem, serviço social, etc., exatamente nesse transcurso de um país que era jovem, que já não está tanto, para um país cada vez mais envelhecido, que é o IANSP já de hoje. Eu diria que é até uma obrigação dessa casa preparar esse caminho e ser um modelo, ser uma referência, de trazer ideias do resto do país, mas também de fora. E aí eu gostaria de falar um pouquinho sobre o Canadá. O Brasil hoje tem em torno de 12% da população com mais de 60 anos. O Canadá tem exatamente o dobro, 24%. Os nossos próximos anos são o que o Canadá percorreu nas últimas décadas, não anos. O Canadá teve um processo muito mais lento de envelhecimento que o Brasil já está e terá para as próximas 3, 4 décadas. Tanto é que no ano 2050, a proporção de idosos no Brasil e no Canadá é praticamente igual, em torno de 30%. Vejam o desafio para um país já desenvolvido, um país que já tem a sua estrutura feita, que já tem os grandes outros dilemas e desafios, como educar a população, preparar a infraestrutura, prover eletricidade, energia, grande drama nosso no momento, água. Todas essas questões e desafios que nós ainda estamos aqui tentando sobreviver a elas, o Canadá já percorreu. E daqui para frente, o Canadá terá aumentado a proporção de idosos de 24% para 30%. Eles estão muito preocupados. Nós, com todos esses outros desafios ainda para serem resolvidos, vamos ter que colocar muito mais ênfase em cuidado das pessoas idosas, que não passará de 24% para 30%, passará de 12% para 30%. Vamos aprender o que um país como o Canadá já tem feito e continuará fazendo. Vamos estabelecer laços estreitos. Uma das iniciativas que eu estou conversando com o Baviera, com o Latif, com o Dr. Abrão, é exatamente de ter uma comitiva aqui do IANSP que possa visitar o Canadá, possa ir a centros do Canadá para aprender um pouco o que eles já fizeram, o que eles pretendem fazer para os próximos anos. Em particular, como disse meu caro amigo Latif, uma coisa muito importante, que é desenvolver uma cultura do cuidado. Uma cultura do cuidado que é essencial para que a gente possa responder aos desafios desse aumento tão rápido da população idosa no nosso Brasil. Nós não estamos com uma cultura de cuidado. Nós estamos com hospitais e instituições que ainda estão voltadas para a cura e não para o cuidado. À medida em que a população envelhece, os problemas dessa população, na imensa maioria, não são curáveis por natureza, são doenças crônicas, não transmissíveis. São doenças que, quando vêm, ficam. E é exatamente aprender o que as iniciativas, por exemplo, da professora Lynn MacDonald, vem trazendo, voltadas para o cuidado, tentando ver como organizar a sociedade, não só o setor saúde, não só o setor social. Nós temos aqui a presença da Cláudia Flor, representando a Secretaria de Saúde. É trazer a Secretaria de Saúde para esse paradigma do cuidado e, de novo, a responsabilidade de uma instituição como o IANSP, respeitada, tida como certamente o melhor hospital público de São Paulo e, portanto, do Brasil, de ter esse compromisso de ajudarmos a pensar, a pilotar, a implementar, a fazer dessa casa um hospital amigo do idoso, em que a gente possa testar ideias que possam vir, por exemplo, do Canadá. E é por isso que eu acho a presença hoje de Lynn McDonald uma das grandes expressões na gerontologia do Canadá. Foi essa ponte que a gente pôde fazer entre o IANSP e a Universidade de Toronto, trazendo Lynn McDonald, facilitada pela Louise Plouffe, que, como já vocês sabem pela apresentação feita pelo Abrão, é uma pessoa que está associada a mim pessoalmente, mas também institucionalmente. Nós trabalhamos juntos na Organização Mundial da Saúde. Eu tive o privilégio de recebê-la sob os auspícios do governo do Canadá para conosco ficar preparando uma das grandes iniciativas da Organização Mundial da Saúde na área de saúde do idoso, que é o projeto hoje global da Cidade Amiga do Idoso, que nós começamos com 35 cidades e hoje foi crescendo centenas, hoje provavelmente mais de 1.600 cidades que estão usando aquele protocolo que nós criamos de uma forma ou de outra. Ainda muito incipiente no Brasil, ainda aos trancos e barrancos, mas eu espero que a gente possa finalmente ter orgulho de dizer que o Brasil também está participando desse projeto internacional. Eu lhe agradeço, Lynn, a sua presença, sua disponibilidade de vir aqui acrescentar, trazer um pouco dessa experiência que vocês estão trazendo e desenvolvendo, e, sobretudo, fazer um pouco de ênfase num aspecto fundamental. Esse trabalho que a Lynn vai hoje compartilhar com vocês não são apenas ideias, é um trabalho feito com base em evidência. São ideias que são colocadas em prática e depois testadas, monitoradas, avaliadas. E é isso que também nós precisamos aprender. Não é só o achismo, eu acho que vai dar certo. É vocês poderem pegar essas ideias, implementá-las como piloto, monitorá-las, avaliá-las e depois então colocá-las como prática e como política nesta casa e a partir daqui servir como modelo. Muitas vezes eu compartilhei isso com o Latif, com o Abrão, com a Baviera, de que se essa casa realmente aceitar o desafio de que é uma incubadora de ideias para depois virem outros do Estado e de outros estados do Brasil, para que venham aprender aquilo que vocês irão implementar. A Casa do Idoso já será uma realidade aqui dentro do IANSP, muito em breve, e o nosso papel será de facilitar que nós possamos ter sumidades internacionais reconhecidas como a Lynn McDonald, mas também a Louise Plouffe, que estará debatendo as ideias apresentadas, e eu só tenho a agradecer que essa iniciativa hoje esteja tomando corpo. Muito obrigado.
Bom, vocês podem perceber pela qualidade das palavras do Dr. Kalash que o debate logo após a palestra será muito interessante. Será aberto a perguntas de todo o auditório. Eu gostaria de passar a palavra a todos, mas pelo tempo que corre rapidamente, vou pedir escusas e passar a palavra diretamente à nossa palestrante, para que os senhores a conheçam melhor. A professora Lynn McDonald, ela é professora na Faculdade de Serviço Social da Universidade de Toronto. Dirige o Instituto de Curso de Vida e Envelhecimento e é co-diretora do Programa Colaborativo de Envelhecimento, Cuidados Paliativos e de Suporte. Ela é diretora científica do NICE, que é a Iniciativa para Cuidados da Pessoa Idosa. A sua produção inclui a coautoria de um importante livro canadense, chamado Envelhecimento no Canadá Contemporâneo, além de outros livros e artigos, como o primeiro texto canadense sobre o tema da violência contra o idoso. Ela tem longa trajetória de excelência no ensino e no Instituto de Curso de Vida e Envelhecimento. Eu vou passar a palavra à professora Lin e pediria a todos os nossos convidados que tomassem assento na primeira fila para que possamos apreciar a palestra com mais conforto. Professora Lin, por favor.
Obrigado. Bom dia. Bom dia. Bom dia. Bom dia. That's all I know. And I'm really sorry I can't speak Portuguese. So I will try and go slowly when I'm giving this presentation. So it's not so hard to translate. What I want to do today, if it's all right with you, is to do an overview of population aging in Canada. I would say that we have the highest population of aging people in North America. We have more older Canadians per capita than the Americans do in the United States. And then I would like to give you an overview of the National Initiative for the Care of the Elderly, which is, thank you, obrigado, which we call NICE for short. One of the important issues in Canada today is that almost 16% of the Canadian population of Canada is age 65 or over, and that's about 1 in 6 Canadians. According to the median growth scenario that we talk about, we will have more older people over age 65 than we have children under age 15. So we're running out of children. If you look at this particular graph, you can see where the black line crosses over the light line, and I can tell you in the province of Ontario right this minute, where I'm from, that there are more older people than there are children, 15 years of age and older. The fastest growing group in Canada, which is probably occurring here as well in Brazil, is those people who are 85 years of age and over. When you look at this graph, you can see the 85 and over are the largest proportion and the fastest growing group that we have. Those people who fall between the ages of 65, 75, up to 80 tend to be fairly healthy, tend to be quite an independent group of people, unlike the 85-year-old population who are more likely to be housed in a nursing home, usually with 3 different issues. The life expectancy in Canada, I think, is fairly close to what it is in this particular country. And we know that it has been increasing since 1961. Our life expectancy for women at age 65 remains greater than that for men, which also causes a bit of problem at the older end of the age population because marriage and so on becomes more difficult. But basically in 2011, a woman at birth could be expected to live to 83.3 years. In 2011, a man could be expected to live to about 78.94 years. The sex ratio, as I was alluding to a few minutes ago, has become a really serious problem because we have 125 women for 100 men. And some Canadians are rejoicing that men are living longer because now we can have more relationships and more later marriages and things may get better. But at the moment, being a single woman without a partner is very sometimes difficult, and single men are accosted. By the age 80, there will be 170 women for 100 men. Even though Canada is is a huge country. It's a small country with people. And what we have today are 6,000 centenarians. That's all we have. And if you look at the purple bar on your right-hand side for the younger group, you can see that almost 50% are saying that they're doing okay. When we look at the other end of the scale, you can see that older people, basically, only 23% are saying that they have poor or fair health. The big issue in Canada, and I think worldwide, is the prevalence of dementia. And in 2011, there were 747,000 Canadians living with some type of cognitive impairment related to dementia. That would be 14.9% of Canadians aged 65 years of age and older. And that is a figure that's reported by the Alzheimer's Society in Canada, the United States, like all across the world. The figure is fairly high, and it's fairly inexpensive disease. If we look at it as just part of the Canadian population overall, only about 2.3% of the Canadian population has some form of cognitive disability. In terms of mental health, older Canadians do very well. Their mental health overall is no different than any other age group. And in fact, younger age groups have more mood disorders and they have more problems, they have way more stress than older people in Canada. So that even though we are concerned about mental health services in our country, mental health is not the big issue. The big issue is dementia. Chronic disease, of course, is the problem of the older adult. If you look just overall, about 70%, I can't see that, has some type of chronic disease, and the whole rate goes up as people get older. The problem with chronic disease and the medical system in Canada is that we have an acute care system. And the acute care system is used to treat anything but chronic illnesses. So one of the big issues we do have in Canada is kind of a mismatch between the fact that people are chronically ill and they need chronic sustainability. So the chronic illness is truly not what we have prepared for. Canadians are starting to recognize that if we're really going to look after older people, if we really are, that older people need to age at home and that we need to provide those services to them in the home so that they may remain there. And when everybody adds up the dollars, and the studies have been done in the United States, they've been done in Canada, home care costs less than does medical care. And I think all of you know that too. If you look at the illnesses that prevail with older people, again, I'm sure it's very similar here, where high blood pressure is an issue, arthritis. Everybody, it seems to have arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Chronic pain is also a very serious issue that, again, many people overlook. And you can compare it to younger people who have totally different illnesses. When we measure the functional capacity of older people, 14% of seniors are unable to do housework. For the population that is growing the fastest, those over 85, 25% of this group have a moderate limitation in functional capacity, 15% have severe limitation, and 5% have a total limitation. Functional capacity is measured many ways, about the strength of the individual, muscle tone, so on, including activities of daily living. 92.1% of Canadians live in private households. 7.9% of those folks live in what we call collective dwelling. It is not a nursing home. It is a place where older people can live on their own and be somewhat independent. whereas only 4.5% of all seniors in Canada live in a nursing home. These proportions, believe it or not, have remained the same since the year 2001. 1 in 5 Canadians aged 45 years of age and older, 1 in 5 provides some form of care to older adults living in the community. 25% of family caregivers are seniors themselves. So we have seniors looking after seniors. But as I noted earlier, those are the younger seniors that I was talking about, the new senior. And in fact, in Canada, we have a program called Rethink Aging. It's time to rethink aging. We're not dealing with just poor, frail, vulnerable, demented older people. We're dealing with healthy, vibrant older people, at least up till the 80s. Going back to caregivers, 33% of that 25% are older than 75. In 2011, family caregivers spent 444 million unpaid hours in caregiving, looking after someone particularly with a cognitive impairment. People with cognitive impairment require more caregiving than any other group out there. In 2040, family caregivers are expected to spend 1.2 billion unpaid hours per year in looking after older people. The toll on families is astronomical. I'm not sure if it's the same problem that you would have here in Sao Paulo, I don't know, but there is a huge price that caregivers pay. And the fact remains that up to 75% of caregivers actually will develop a psychological illness. 15 to 32% will definitely experience depression. And most of the time, that depression does not go treated. We tend to ignore it because we always think there's only one patient. But there isn't a patient, there's a patient with a family. And all of the family are affected by whatever happens to be wrong with the older person. One of the big consequences for all of this, we have to get the information from people like you into the hands of the people who really need it. And the way our systems operate, and I think our systems operate very similar in Brazil as they do in Canada, it takes way too long for knowledge to reach those who really need it. Is what we do is we talk to each other. We go to a conference, we give a paper, we have a symposium, and we talk to each other. But we don't get that message out onto the street to the caregiver who's looking after the older person. As professionals, researchers, hospital personnel, we have few direct links really to the people who need the information. We'll have a patient in the hospital, we'll send them home with home care, and that's the end of it. At the universities, I don't know about you, it takes too long to train a whole generation of students to get out there and start thinking about older people. In Canada, at least, medicine does not particularly focus on the care of the elderly. And the other thing that is really interesting, which I'm sure all of you know, are there hundreds and hundreds of websites out there that one will deal with diabetes, one will deal with Parkinson's disease, one will deal with Alzheimer's disease, and one will deal with any disease you want to label. And one of the consequences of this is that people don't get the care they need. So if you get a diagnosis at this hospital, if you have Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's disease, and you go home, what does that mean for the family? What does that mean for the income that person may be bringing in? What does that mean for social events? What does that mean for the whole family? The website doesn't tell you that. It just says, you know, there's plaques and there's tangles and these are the drugs you use and that's the end of the story. That's not the end of the story. It's a bigger story. It's an interdisciplinary story, and in fact, we know from the research in the field of aging that if you're not delivering team care, you're not giving good care to an older person, because it takes more than one to look after an older person who has very complex issues, so that we really need teams to deal with the issues. In the United States, the Hartford Foundation decided they needed to play catch up because they were way behind on their aging issues and the care of older people. The Hartford decided they would train geriatricians and family physicians, that they would train social workers, and that they would train nurses. So they put millions and millions of dollars into that, trying to get the interdisciplinarity going. So there is no interdisciplinary venue, for example, in Canada. I mean, we have teams all over the hospital. Everybody's part of the team. Yeah, I'm part of a team. But the team, in my estimation, doesn't always work. There is no space for practitioners and researchers to work together. Because of some of these issues in Canada, some of us did some thinking and decided that we needed to do something about the problem. We couldn't wait I couldn't wait to graduate my next group of physicians and the next group of social workers and the next group of nurses, all of the people that I teach gerontology with. We have a severe shortage of professionals and students specializing in the care of the elderly. I do not know if that's the situation here. We can pretend we don't need them. The truth is, the population of older people is growing at such a rapid rate, we are going to have to do something about the issue. The second point is, we have massive gaps in interdisciplinary care of the elderly. 30 to 45% of patients, this is in Canada, this research was done in Canada, 30 to 45% of patients are not receiving care based on scientific evidence. That is a serious issue. A really short story about NICE. Canada has a National Centers of Excellence funding program out of Ottawa. It is a program that is basically for the elite. It usually doesn't deal with people, it usually deals with cars and icebergs and fish. However, somewhere they weakened and they funded NICE as a new initiative. It was incorporated in 2006. It is a not-for-profit charitable organization housed at the Institute for the Life Course in Aging. And it also received further funding to develop an international arm and partnerships with 9 other countries. We have over 3,000 members in Canada, and that's quite a few. One, we were not permitted to do research, and I'm a researcher, so I found this very difficult. What am I going to do if I can't do research? And the government said, you're going to do knowledge transfer, and that simply means disseminating evidence-based research across the university community continuum. We were told that we needed to foster interdisciplinarity. We were told that we had to improve the gerontological and geriatric curricula and enrollment, and we had to start bringing about policy changes that were favorable to the elderly. And for that, they gave us $2 million. Then they gave us another $1 million for the international group, which, when I tell you they put $500 million into the Hartford Fund in the United States, Canada was kind of broke. And so we didn't have a lot of funding, but we did the best we could. So none of us knew much about knowledge transfer, and we frantically tried to educate ourselves as quickly as possible. And we looked at all the different types of networks. We picked one particular network that we thought would be the quickest and the best way to go forward, and that was what they call knowledge networks, which are focused on groups of experts in a particular area, so that everybody knew what they were doing and that they had a common concern about older people. Because the truth is, in Canada, only 20% of knowledge gets through. Only 20% actually gets through. And so that all the knowledge and research that you're doing in your labs and I'm doing at my place isn't going far. When we really looked at the area, there were at least 20 theories available. You can see that the partnership isn't just doctors and medical staff, it's everybody. Okay, the nice structure is just simply this. We have a knowledge identification committee, we have a program development committee, which we engage in research or training. The standards for geriatric medicine were adopted. The Canadian Geriatric Society developed standards. We have a seniors advisory. This is key. Older people and their families belong to NICE. They're all members of NICE if they so choose to be. So that we don't do anything without their approval. And then we have the usual policy planning protocol. And the ICC ICE is the international collaboration for which perhaps Brazil would like to become a member partner. I don't know, it's up to Brazil. But we do have 9 countries that I'll talk about a little later that we work with, and anything that gets developed, for example, in South Africa or anywhere, is really good for Canada because we are totally multicultural. What we then did was develop what we call theme teams, and we have this many teams of caregiving, dementia, elder abuse, end-of-life care, mental health, law and the elderly, ethnicity and aging, which is very big for us, economic security, and technology and aging. Every one of those theme teams has 2 co-chairs. One is a practitioner and one is a researcher. So they have to work together. We have the media are part of us. A major television, the second major television station in Canada is part of our group. So the teams decided that what they were going to do over time was develop interdisciplinary, evidence-based tools that they could give to people, and that's just a picture. We have over 200 pocket tools. These pocket tools are in hard copy, as you can see, or you can get them digitally on a handheld. These are evidence-based. They have been tested. There are only 2 tools in our whole lot that reflect what we call best practices. And that has to be the law in the elderly, and the police, who are new to working in the field of elder abuse in Canada, also have what they consider a tool, a couple of tools. Okay, elder abuse, the easy tool is is one of the most prominent tools that we use. This was developed by a medical doctor, Dr. Mark Yaffe, and it only has 6 questions. And what it does is it tells you if there's an answer to one of the 2 to 6 questions, you need to investigate if there's elder abuse. And that you pass on to whoever is on your team or whoever is the expert in doing that. The EASY tool has been random clinically trialed in 5 countries, so that we know as an indicator it works. The second one is we have a number of mental health tools. We have a whole bunch of them. This one is used primarily by nurses in the community and nurses in hospitals for screening and assessment, and by family caregivers on a number of issues such as delirium and depression. There's 2 of these. There's one for the family, for couples, and one that's basically about children. We have a whole suite of tools on financial literacy. Because Canada has a lot of immigrants, it's really important that they understand how money works, So we have up to 16 or 18 tools on banking and all kinds of stuff. We have tools, believe it or not. I don't know if kin care grandparenting is an issue here. We call it custodial grandparenting, where the parents are killed, they're in jail, they're drug addicts, there's an issue. Those people are a new phenomena in our country, and we have tried to develop as much information for them as we can. We have one of the very first tools that we developed was called the End of Life tool, and that's the one on the very bottom. It tells people, it tells professionals, and it tells caregivers, informal caregivers, and older people themselves, what is it really like to die? And it is helpful because people are given tips on what they can do to be helpful to the dying person, whether it be in the hospital, whether it be in the community. This particular tool is the most demanded tool. We have no money, we have no advertising, and I can tell you right now, we have up to 3 million requests for our tools just in Canada. And this one is one of the most popular, and it is used by a number of, it's used in palliative care units in hospitals in Canada. It's used by the Victoria Order of Nurses, who look after people who are dying in the community. And we have a number of specialized palliative care programs. It also contains really important information about funeral. It contains important information about what a medical person can do besides what just an informal care person can do. I was invited to China to use this because in China, society, dying is not talked about. And they have adopted this tool, and they use it in nursing homes, they use it everywhere. You can see the 6 questions that are important. This is another, the brief abuse screen for the elderly. You can use this right out of the gate. A social worker could use this in the community, a nurse could use this in the community. There's a very short number of questions. This instrument has been random clinically tried several times in Quebec and found to be very accurate. The Iowa is indicators of abuse, where once you think you have abuse going on, whoever is investigating, a nurse, or again a social worker or a physician, that actually this will give you the severity of the abuse and how quickly you need to intervene. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's what we do to save money in Canada. It's a cheap way to deal with the burgeoning older population. Obrigada.